Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at the astrological chart of Suzanne Summers. As I record this, this would have been her 77th birthday. And it's just really interesting when people pass away right around the time of their birthday. So what I want to do with this particular chart, I want to see if I can identify certain factors that correspond to things that happened in her life and see if there are any astrological connections. And I really should have done this every time that I did a celebrity chart interpretation, because when you are doing a celebrity, hopefully you know some important facts about that person's life. You know, important periods of time, things that happened, and so on and so forth. So I read Suzanne Summers' first autobiography, which was called Keeping Secrets, and that they made that into a TV movie. I can't remember. I think it was in the 80s. I don't think it might have been early 90s. But I read that book more than once, and I really recommend it if you have grown up with alcoholism or other addiction. This can be a very healing book for you to understand how your attitudes are formed. I read it not because I had grown up that way, but because I knew other people who were close to me who had grown up with that. And I wanted to understand what made them tick. And so it's just a great book. And the movie, as I recall, was a long time ago. I just remember liking it. So this is what I want to do. I want to talk about her appearance because, you know, she was known as a sex symbol and what could have contributed to that astrologically. I want to talk about her situation on Three's Company, and that was kind of like a very awkward and even acrimonious situation where she asked for a lot of money and she didn't get it, and they fired her and they tried to replace her with another blonde as if she was that expendable. And everybody thought she was through when that happened to her. And she proved them wrong. So I want to see, how does that happen? How does somebody, how is someone that resilient? And also just her business acumen. You know, she was somebody who's sold the Thigh Master and other types of things. I remember her having a clothing line. I used to see her on Home Shopping Network, or it might have been QVC, one of those kinds of things, in probably the 90s again, maybe in the 2000s also. And before, you know, YouTube and ASMR and all of that, I remember falling asleep to her on Home Shopping Network. It was very, I wouldn't say that it was because of her voice. It was just very soothing to watch something that was very mundane, like talking about jewelry or clothing. She was a great saleswoman, but, you know, she was also just very savvy when it came to business. She always had her fire in different irons, or irons in different fires, I should say. So I want to talk about her career. She doesn't have any planets in the 10th house. Oh, and of course her home life, which would be the 4th house in particular. Sometimes you can look at the first. Yeah, I just want to talk about all of these things. And so I'm going to start by talking about her appearance and how people have received her over the years. So Suzanne was a Libra, and she had the moon in Cancer, and she had Taurus rising, but she also had Mercury in Scorpio. Her Venus was at 0 degrees of Sag, so that was on the cusp of Scorpio, and she had Mars in Scorpio. I did not know that until just now. I wasn't paying attention to that. So, all of those planets, I mean, Venus at 0 degrees of Sag, that is very much on the cusp, obviously, 0 degrees. So it's amazing how much feminine energy she actually had. You may not realize this, but Libra is a masculine sign. Sag is too. We're going to say, okay, we're going to give that to her, but it's 0 degrees, so remember that. And she carried herself in a feminine way. I had somebody write to me on YouTube and say that they were a Libra, but they were talking about being feminine. What I mean by that is just how the signs are grouped. The air and fire signs are masculine, and the earth and water are feminine. It has nothing to do with how a person looks per se. Sometimes it can manifest that way in how they behave. But if you can think about it this way, as a Libra woman, she was getting into conflicts with, like the studio or the network or whatever you want to call it, the powers that be about certain things that she was doing because she was butting up against that authoritarianism or whatever you want to call it. And that's because of the masculine energy. Masculine signs, they are asserting their power in an outward way. And, there's more passivity with feminine signs. That doesn't mean that people who have a lot of feminine energy can't achieve things in the world. I'm not saying that. But typically the way they go about it is almost like a roundabout approach. Cardinal signs are very can-do and self-starters. And her sun and her moon are both in the cardinal modality. So that is another not feather in her cap, but just something that really helped her to motivate her to kind of take it on herself. Like, when you go into something like show business, there's not like this template that you follow. You don't go to community college and take some courses and then you get to go into show business. So it takes a lot of, initiation from the self, not kind of being dependent on others to show you the way. And there are many ways that people, achieve success in show business. There's not just one. I love reading biographies and autobiographies of people in the music business in Hollywood because I find it fascinating to hear about their life before they hit it big and like what it was like how did they get there. I find it very inspiring and just fascinating. And, she was somebody that first and foremost was physically attractive. So that was one way for her to, get in the front door. And she was doing ads and things like that. I can't remember the whole sequence of events because it was so long ago that I read her autobiography, but I do know that she did some modeling and things like that. And she met her husband, I believe she met her husband pretty soon after she was doing this work. She actually got into trouble legally because she was passing a bad check. She was a single mother. Well, she actually was married briefly when she was a teenager. And I mean, she was a teenage mother and she had money problems because of that. I can't remember if her ex-husband was paying child support. I suspect he was, but for some reason, I remember her having money being tight for her. And so, anyway, in terms of her physical appearance, with her sun in Libra, Libra is ruled by Venus. Her rising sign is Taurus, which is also ruled by Venus. And the rising sign is the the cusp of the first house, and that is the house of the self and the body. So when you want to see how you come across to others, you look at that, and you will see that someone who has Taurus here, well, I have Taurus rising, and I just know how I was when I was younger. It may be more of a thing when you're younger about wanting to appear sexy. And when I was looking at her death notices and old interviews, she was saying that she wore makeup every day. So she was just one of those people who did that. And honestly, I think that's Libra. I think that's Libra more than Taurus. Even though both of them are ruled by Venus, Taurus is an earth sign. And so earth signs are down to earth. They're very grounded. And what that means with Taurus, and this is one of the reasons why Taurus can be a very appealing sign. And like in show business, somebody who is a Taurus can come across very favorably because they're very down to earth. Valerie Bertinelli is a Taurus. And I was going to say Kelly Clarkson is a Taurus. And both of these women, people say, oh man, they're so real. They're so down to earth, and people love that. I think Adele is a Taurus as well. People love, and I don't know her personality though, so that was probably not a good idea to bring her up. But people love those who don't have a facade, who just, it's like what you see is what you get. And I just think that Taurus women are capable of showing themselves, even when they are in the public eye, showing themselves without makeup, showing themselves when they don't look perfect. And Libra, because it is an air sign, so it is not of the earth, I feel like it's more ethereal and more intangible. So it's almost like that fantasy of beauty. And it may compel Libra women to be very interested in preserving the fantasy. So anyway, I think that Suzanne had a bit of that earthy quality because of, the Taurus rising. And that also can be very appealing because it really does exude sex appeal. Now, this is something that got me in trouble in the past, and I really don't mean it as badly as it might come across, but I feel that sometimes Libra individuals can be beautiful without being sexy. And you have to understand something. Being sexy is overrated, that's not the meaning of life, is to be sexy. And I'm wrong. I'm going to be wrong some of the time. But what I mean by that is that the beauty of Libra is very, I don't know if the word ethereal doesn't really cut it, but what I mean is that pristine maybe is a word. Libra as a sign, a sun sign, let's say, can like what happened with Susan, can have inner planets in Virgo. In Suzanne's case, she didn't have any inner planets in Virgo, but sometimes women do, and that can heighten that sense. Like Gwyneth Paltrow is a Libra woman, but there's something about her. I'm not saying I'm sure there are men that find her sexy. I'm a woman. I'm a heterosexual woman, so maybe I'm not the one to talk about it, but she doesn't seem earthy. And to me, that's more of what makes a woman seem sexual or sensual. Yeah, maybe sensual is a better word. There's not, like, to me, a sensual quality with Libra. It's more of just that garden variety beauty. which is nothing to sneeze at. It's actually very nice. But anyway, because Suzanne had Taurus rising, I think she was able to have the best of both worlds. Because when she was on Three's Company, her basic uniform was, short shorts and a very tight-fitting T-shirt that was common in the late 70s, or the 70s as a whole. It was kind of like, coinciding with the disco era. And she definitely wore, those boots and tight jeans. I don't know. I think she wore jeans. A lot of times she just wore shorts. And they used to call it a TNA show. Tits and Ass. And they had, a bunch of these shows in the late 70s. Another one being Charlie's Angels, which was on the same network on ABC. And they were, showing women in skimpy outfits or tight outfits. And that was the big draw. So the thing that separated Three's Company was that it was actually well written. It was actually funny. And when Suzanne was on the show, she was a very popular figure in the pop culture. So the bottom line, and she wasn't that young at that time. She was already in her 30s when the show began, nearing 30. I think she was born in, no, she was like, I think she was born in 1946. So I think the show began in 1977, around thereabouts. And so she definitely was not young when it began, but she was still a sex symbol. Reminds me a lot of Farrah Fawcett in that regard, because I think Farrah wasn't like in her early 20s either when she became famous. I think she was actually in her early 30s. And that poster that Farrah had, it's very iconic and kind of like really takes you back to the 70s. It's like kind of synonymous with the 70s, actually. So that was what was big at that time. And Suzanne was very much a part of that. And she wasn't making much money on the show. So at the beginning, and eventually asked for more money. But let's get back. I wanted to talk about her childhood. So she had an alcoholic father, and I think he was also very, he was violent. I don't remember if he ever hit her, but they had to hide from him. So you can imagine the trauma that she experienced. In her fourth house of home and family, she has Saturn and Pluto, and they're in conjunction. Saturn can be the father. So I believe that anytime a person has Saturn in conjunction with Pluto, regardless of other attributes that this could indicate with a person, that they may have had issues with their father that stemmed from his abuse. And what I think happens with something like that is that it makes the person very, I was going to say strong. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But more than that, I think it makes a person resourceful, because Saturn can be pull yourself up by the bootstraps. There can be a lot of hardship. And I think they might have had financial problems growing up, her family. I can't remember 100%, but I think she came from a large Catholic family, and that, money was scarce. If that is the case, if I recalled that correctly, it would make sense why she was, some people would call it money hungry. I would just call it that she had an entrepreneurial spirit, and that she just found ways to make money in different areas. And it probably is like the textbook example of, diversifying your funds or your money making and things like that, rather than putting all your eggs into one basket. Now, her husband is a Cancer sun sign, and he is 10 years older than her. So his sun sign and her sun sign in astrology square off. But I don't know what his degree of Cancer is, a sun sign. So they might not officially square off, but it really doesn't matter to me because it still will show a difference in attitude, just in basic terms about life, because Libra is going to be more detached emotionally, and Cancer is very sentimental and very attached to the past. Well, that's what sentimental is. But I mean, they come from a very emotional place, and air signs come from a rational place. However, her moon is in Cancer. So sometimes you do see when the sun signs aren't compatible, the moon signs are. But in any case, when you have, like two sun signs that square off, or some other synastry with two charts that, are involving inner planets, for example, that can indicate an attraction, like a physical attraction. And apparently they were really freaky. I mean, they were hot and heavy for one another, even in their senior years. And, she was talking, I think that was several years ago, about the fact that they had sex 3 times that day or something. And I was reading the comments yesterday, and someone said, who cares? All these people said, who cares? Well, it is significant because you don't hear people who are senior citizens talking that way, but she did. Where does that come from in her astrological information? Venus and Sag can be an open book about one's love life. I think it's the Taurus rising, maybe a little bit raunchy. Or you could say guileless when it comes to things like not having a facade and just kind of being very open about stuff. So I think that can be very good in a lot of ways because it can make the person matter of fact about things in life. So, and you could say too that Mars in Scorpio has a very, strong sex drive. She does have Mars in the 7th house. But the other thing I found very interesting, and what I mean by that is Mars in the 7th house, sometimes I will interpret that as having a lot of conflict in relationships, and maybe the person gets involved with people that they fight with, and somehow they're attracted to that. They think that is a good thing. But I also think Mars in the 7th house can be a relationship that is very much based on sexuality, or a relationship where the person, they do things together. They do a lot of activities together. It's a very active relationship. Interestingly, in that 7th house, this is Libra's domain, by the way, the house of committed partnership and marriage and serious relationships, one-on-one relationships. She has a conjunction between Mercury and Mars. And that can really be, to me, this connection, maybe it's two people that are very talkative. I have Mercury in the 7th house, and what they say about that is that it means that the person really enjoys hearing other people's opinions, points of view, and they really enjoy having relationships where there is an exchange of ideas. And that is certainly true for me. And I see here that she has Mercury in Scorpio, which is very interesting. I noticed, she was kind of an interesting conversationalist. She told a lot of stories, which I think is really a hallmark of Cancer, because Cancer is all about the past, and our memories are connected to the past, obviously. So a person with the moon in Cancer can be very sentimental, very emotionally connected to the past. Her moon is in the third house, which is of the mind. So I can think of somebody who is often thinking about what happened in the past. It's like having Mercury in Cancer. And that can go both ways. Sometimes it can be good, like for a writer who either wants to base characters on the past, or they are just very caught up in the past. Maybe they're stuck in the past. That can indicate that. Maybe they have a lot of emotion surrounding their memories. And that can, create its own set of challenges, because I feel that with Mercury and the moon, it's almost like, where do our emotions begin and our memories end? They seem like one and the same, don't they, sometimes? When we have a memory, it evokes an emotion. So when I see interviews with her, she tells a lot of stories. And so I feel that that is connected to her moon sign and being, somebody who is very emotional, but that conjunction between Saturn and Pluto can be very tough, because it can mean a lot of oppression in the family of origin. And taken separately, Saturn can also be restrictive, meaning that there might have been like financial hardship. There might have been an austere home environment, like it felt very barren of positive emotions. And when you have someone who is kind of like terrorizing the family, I could see that happening, because everybody's on pins and needles with that person, that abuser. And yet, her father did quit drinking, and she did end up having a very good relationship before he passed away. So it wasn't just like he was doing that and he never got better. He did get better. And another thing Saturn can be is the authoritarian figure. Now, of course, we say that about parents, that they are authority figures, but an authoritarian is someone who really tries to dominate that type of environment, maybe abusing power. And they have a lot of rules, and they have a lot of, heavy-handedness. So she did have that. I can't remember offhand, but I think, as I recall, it even had to do with, her being, like not dressing a certain way. I can't remember. But this was she was born in the 40s. So she came of age in the early 60s. This was a totally different time than would have occurred by the end of the decade. If you ever see videos, some kind of film of 1962 versus 1969, it'll just blow your mind at what level of change happened. And somebody pointed out that some videos, if you look at a video from, let's say, 2003 and compare it today, which is 20 years, you wouldn't even be able to tell if the film was good enough, high resolution enough. You would just be like thinking it was today, because things on the surface don't seem like they've changed much at all. Of course, that's not true, but I'm just saying that there were a lot of societal shifts in the 60s. And all of that made it like very difficult for people to really wrap their brains around it. And so it's kind of like blowing a fuse, a mental fuse. It was just like George Harrison has a song, It's All Too Much, it's just all too much. But anyway, I think she might have gotten banished from the home. I can't remember all the details after she got pregnant. And so the thing about her being a teenage mother, for instance, I think if I had to decide, okay, what could that possibly indicate? Well, first of all, Cancer is the sign of the mother, and she has in the moon position, which means with the moon, it's like a strong urge. It's not necessarily rational. It's not necessarily, well thought out. It's something that is just coming from the person's core. And so it's possible that, she never had any other kids. So that was one of the things that was I think that was also something that was very difficult. Because, that was a very big challenge for her to deal with that. And, because she was so ambitious, she was one of those people that put her career above all else. So because she was on her own with a child, I think she figured that that was about all she could handle at that point. And so anyway, I think she had a hustling quality about herself that I associate with people who are entrepreneurs in the sense that they are just really motivated by earning money. They're very resourceful. They just really want to make money. It's not, a lot of people will say, oh, they're greedy. That person is really greedy. And it to me, it's not like that. Suzanne had the North Node in Gemini in the second house of earned income. She also had Uranus there. The Uranus energy, I think, is something that can indicate a person in show business where they're not getting that weekly paycheck. They're getting it, well, and she did get it sometimes when she worked on TV shows. I attribute that not only to having the North Node in the second house, which is the soul's mission, is to kind of stand on one's feet materially and produce finances for oneself rather than being dependent on someone, because her South Node is in the 8th house, and that's the karmic past. In other lifetimes, she may have been provided for financially, but it doesn't mean that this is something that she should always do, because, or anybody who has the South Node in the 8th house, because her soul needs to, or our souls crave expansion, which means that we have to go in different directions. And that's really all that it means regarding the nodes, is that I feel like our mission can, and I've heard this described as, it can be just the way that we act. It doesn't have to be like, a specific thing that she knew she was going to go into show business, although it is in Gemini, so it can be about her own voice. And certainly she has written many books. I've read more than one book by her. And so she was able to make that happen while also supporting herself, generating enough income where she wasn't just dependent on her husband. And Uranus giving that kind of, I wouldn't say feast or famine, but kind of maybe like these very sudden changes in one's finances. Another thing, too, that Uranus can represent is technology, so that might even include TV, anything where that involves the collective, and she is making money through that, through the television. To me, indicates why she had that sudden loss of money when she was on Three's Company, because maybe the gamble, well, I know the gamble didn't work, and all of a sudden she was out of a job and she was out of money. So these kinds of like shocks to the system that have a financial connection to it. Now, another area is health. And so one of the things that she was involved with was writing books on health. That's another, I did read one of her books where she discussed her philosophy. I thought she was a vegetarian at least at one time, but I'm not 100% on that. That might not be totally true. But she had diet books, definitely. I actually just looked on Amazon to make sure, because I remember reading them, and I thought it was very interesting. Some of her beliefs, I didn't know if I agreed with them 100%, but yeah, she had something she called summer sizing. So I don't know what her diet was like at the end of her life. But looking at that sixth house, which is the house of health, even apart from that, I would say that when somebody has a prominent Cancer, in this case the moon, they can have issues sometimes with, what is that thing called where they are kind of afraid, like hypochondriacism, I don't know, being a hypochondriac, but not just like they always feel like they're sick, but kind of a fear of being sick. And I don't know if she actually had that. I can't say that she did, but she certainly wrote a lot of books about various aspects of health, and she has a stellium in that sixth house, which can also be the house of work. Now, I find it interesting that she did not have any planets in the 10th house of career, but she had so many in the 6th house. What that says to me is that she was kind of like a workhorse. She was maybe like a workaholic in a lot of ways. And, she had the sun in the 6th house. So she really derived a lot of sense of identity through her work, meaning that she just did things to kind of like make money, you could say, rather than necessarily what she wanted to do. Because sometimes, for instance, people in Hollywood, in show business, they will just take whatever jobs are offered them because they want to keep their name in the, stay relevant, and they also want to make money. That is like their number one concern. I'm not saying that that's true of Suzanne necessarily, but when you have, so she had the sun here, she had Neptune, she had Jupiter and Chiron. Jupiter formed a conjunction with Chiron. I feel that this indicated that she was able to be lucky and therefore successful in her work by, doing things that had to do with healing. And now that I think about it, with the North Node in Gemini, that really could have had something to do with writing, that was, and I do feel that when she had that fiasco with Three's Company, and she was kind of like maybe blackballed a little bit from the industry. I think she performed in Vegas and she did other things. And then she eventually went back. She was on Step by Step, another TV show. So people who are millennials, they probably remember her more from Step by Step than Three's Company. For somebody like me who grew up in the 70s, those who grew up in the 90s might have known her for that. And she had like a second life. So right around the time, or I think because I was reading Wikipedia about all the things that happened, I think right before Step by Step aired, the first episode aired, maybe that same week, her TV movie based on her book Keeping Secrets came out. And what I think that did was it gave her gravitas. It made people understand that she had come from a difficult background, that she had a lot of obstacles to overcome. And, sometimes people form snap judgments based on what is currently happening with people. Like, oh, she's beautiful. She can, she probably never had any problems. She makes a lot of money. She can never have any problems. And they don't know the emotional scarring that a person has had to contend with. So anyway, she also had Neptune here, and this is a placement that I have. And, there's all kinds of things about Neptune, the sixth house, that can be rather negative, of like the person has a very disorderly day-to-day life. They're just kind of drifting through it. I can kind of identify with that in myself, but you can't say that about Suzanne. She was definitely somebody who was very on the ball. She was very driven, and I believe that she had a very clear vision of what she wanted to accomplish. So what the other things that they have said about Neptune in the sixth house is that the person can make, have work. I was going to say make a living. You could say the same thing through something involving artistic endeavors or spiritual endeavors. And so certainly being an actress, she was doing the artistic stuff. Her sun here, that to me is that workaholic, the person who is very identified as somebody who's a working individual. And it's like having the sun in Virgo when you have it in the sixth house. I don't know if, and also, by the way, Jupiter in the sixth house, I feel like can be the type of person who never has problems finding work. Might not be their dream job, but they always manage to have some kind of thing going on where they're making money. Chiron by itself can be, when it comes to work, it might be that there is a woundedness, maybe if the person, the sixth house can be the workplace. And certainly with what happened to her, I feel like it was very unfair what happened to her with Three's Company, because even if somebody could say that she was asking for too much money and what have you, for her coworkers to kind of like shun her, I think was not cool. And I don't know if it was really like that, where they were just totally like washing their hands of her. I can't remember. She did speak about that. She may have not tried to contact them, knowing that they may have been upset with her and maybe not wanting to have to deal with being rejected. Sometimes that is human nature, where you just kind of like leave it alone because you know that it's a very touchy situation, and then you both go your separate ways, but it never gets resolved. And there is a reunion that she did with Joyce DeWitt, who played Janet on the show, and she did also reunite with John Ritter, who he died prematurely as well. I forgot what he died of, but he died, and so she made up with him before then, but I think it had been like 20 years before they had, reconciled. So if that's true, that's really a long time to go without speaking to one another. So that might have been like a painful thing with coworkers and maybe in other circumstances she had similar experiences, because Libra is a sign that really likes harmony and that sense of teamwork. Libra is not a sign of somebody who takes over, takes charge, and doesn't have regard for other people. Not only is Libra polite, but Libra believes in fair play, so I don't see that as being something that she would have participated in. But, the way it turned out, because she had the audacity to ask for money, and I'm being sarcastic about that, they were, not forthcoming, and then it created a lot of problems for her to continue. And of course, there were contractual demands too for the rest of that season. I just want to end, her marriage to her husband lasted for many decades. I think, were they married 46 years? Something along those lines, maybe even more. But he was, he is still alive, but in the context of their relationship, he was 10 years older than her. And I just think that they were doing everything. He was her manager. They were together all the time. So I really do believe they were soulmates. And she has Venus here. Venus rules the 7th house. So when you have Venus in the 7th house, you can really want to be attached to the hip of your partner. It's not one of those placements where the person wants to do their own thing and not have their partner there all the time, or they want more freedom. This is somebody who relishes being part of a partnership. They take pleasure in that. So I think that really, spoke to their relationship. And yeah, it's definitely a sad thing that she died. I mean, she did live into her 70s, but she did live a full life, and she will be missed by a lot of people. So I hope that you enjoyed this. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.